Hey guys, I'm David Mitchell, founder and CEO of TRADEway. What if God himself gave you a blueprint for how to handle your money? Well, the Bible is a practical book. Let's dive in and see what it has to say about wealth, about risk, about leverage, and about investing, and uncover how trading in the stock market can be a powerful tool for moving towards your biggest goals. We're so happy you're here. This is The Word on Investing. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited about this topic because today we're going to talk about God's Roman numeral 1 of wealth creation. And you know what? It's my opinion that there's only one Roman numeral. So let's take a look at this. I think you'll find it interesting. Now, before we go any further, let me say this. This is not just some concept learned in business school, all right? It's actually a law of the universe with regard to economics, and it was put in place by the creator of the universe, and it works just as surely as the law of gravity. Let me show you where I found it. If you look in Luke chapter 19, starting with about verse 20, you'll find this. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared thee, because thou art an austere man. Thou takest up that thou layest not down, and reapest that thou didst not sow. And he said unto him, Out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. And, you know, if you remember this, you had this parable as a child, probably in Sunday school, years ago, and it's the parable of the talents. And remember, Jesus told this story, and of course, these are always object lessons using something we're familiar with to teach us spiritual truth, but also to teach us truths that work here in this physical world. And in this example, the owner of the land was going to take a long trip, and he was leaving his assets in the hands of some trusted people. And he gave 10 pounds to one man, 5 pounds to another man, and 1 pound to the third man. And he said, you know, take care of my assets, make them grow, invest them, make them grow while I'm gone, and I'll come back and I'll let you answer for what you did. And that's the story. And, you know, your Sunday school teacher probably said, well, it's really pictures spiritual gifts and things like that the Lord's given all of us, and we should use them to our best. And that is the spiritual lesson. But one thing that I've learned about how Jesus taught was he won't use a lie to teach a truth. So the physical example that he used to teach the true spiritual lesson is always true also. And in this case, he's showing us a little bit about how wealth is created. And I think you'll see it when we talk about this just a little bit. Let's talk about the man who was the failure for a minute, because why did he fail? 2 reasons. He was fearful, but the reason he was fearful is because he didn't have any skill sets. He was not prepared because when the wealthy individual asked him to take care of his money, he didn't have the skill sets to do that. He wasn't ready. So naturally he was fearful. So when the landowner comes back and takes them to task, he comes to this third man and he says, you failed. Why did you fail? And the man's answer is really interesting because he said, for one thing, you're austere, which means he had kind of a frightening face. His body language was a really tough leader type person. And it was just kind of frightening that he had to answer to this guy. But the real truth here that really helps us is in the last phrase where he says, you reap where you don't sow. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. What does that mean? That means this landowner owned maybe thousands of acres of land. There's no way in the world that he could sow the seeds across this vast amount of land by himself with just 8 or 10 hours a day, which is the man hours he would have by himself. So what did he have to do? He had to multiply those man hours. So he hired maybe hundreds of people and he paid them a fair salary, and they went across sowing these seeds over this man's acreage. And so you had maybe thousands of man hours, certainly hundreds of man hours per day, not just 8 man hours. So what was he doing? He was leveraging the time of many other people. And that is the key. That's the secret to wealth creation, I believe, in the Bible, right there. So what do we have to do? We've got to be able to have our families have the potential to create wealth by earning off the efforts, the man hours of many other people. Now, sadly enough, that is a secret, and I call it a secret not because it's a secret, but it's just because not many people know about it. And even in business school, they don't teach that that's what makes wealth creation work. They don't teach it this way. Basically, even at the MBA level, they teach you to go work for a higher boss. And, that's kind of interesting. I want to mention a book. It's called The Cash Flow Quadrant. If you've never read the book, it's a great read. You can go out there to Amazon and get it. But I actually know one of the co-authors of the book. Her name is Sharon Lecter. We actually had her on our show a while back, if you want to go back there and check out that episode. But this book is a great read because it talks about business and how to do business the right way. And also it talks about the wrong way. And it actually puts all business in 4 different quadrants. And it kind of, if you can picture it, you'll have a top left, and then down below that a quadrant, and then a top right, and then below that a quadrant. So let's do it from top to bottom here on the left side. The first one's called the Employee Quadrant. And that's where you trade your infinitely valuable hours for a little bit of someone else's money. In other words, you got a job, right? The boss tells you how many weeks a year you can go on vacation with your family, when you can go, when you have to be back. He basically controls your life. And he also establishes what your worth is by how much he pays you, right? And that is the worst quadrant if you read the book, right? The cash flow quadrant. That's the worst quadrant to be in for a lot of reasons. But my main reason is because you have zero control over your time. You don't have any time freedom. Now, if you go down below that, the next quadrant is called self-employed. And that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? That's where you own a business. Maybe you buy a car wash, or maybe you open a small restaurant. Well, the problem with this is that if you're not on the premises, you fail because the business won't run itself. So actually what happens is you've created a job that owns you. You've created a company that owns you, and you have to be there, and you still don't have any time freedom. And you can't get leverage. Remember, the secret in the Bible was God said you have to be able to leverage the hours of many other people, and you're not able to do that with those kinds of businesses. And yet, when people think about, I want to be an entrepreneur, the very first thing that comes to mind is they'll either want to own a restaurant, or they'll want to own a car wash, or they'll try to think of something they love to do and try to make money doing that. And you've even heard that as if it's a law of the universe. Like, how do you get wealthy? Well, you find something you love to do and figure out a way to make money doing that. It doesn't work that way. What you really need to do is find out what people want and need and make that and sell it. I mean, if you're going to start a business, that's what you do. But then you're still stuck in this quadrant where you have to be there all the time. Now, if we go to the top right quadrant, it's called the business owner. And that's a little bit better because what you do is, in that case, you learn some really key principles, which is basically you duplicate yourself in your employees. You teach them how to do everything you know how to do, and then you delegate to them, and that allows you to grow. It also allows you to be able to take a vacation, and the company just keeps going fine without you there. And yet, learning to delegate, probably the hardest thing anybody does, because you always think you can do it better than the other guy. The truth is, maybe you do it a little better, but you can never grow a large business without duplicating and delegating. And at least that puts you in a place where you have some time freedom, and so that actually works. Now, you have some other problems in that quadrant, though. And it probably has to do mostly with expenses, because think about it. You're going to have a huge payroll expense every month, twice a month actually, where you pay all these employees that you've duplicated and delegated to, right? You've got all of the insurance you got to take care of. You've got all the people problems that just come up in managing large numbers of people. You've got to keep your inventory going. All of this takes enormous amounts of money. And it works, and you can make that work, but really you don't have a whole lot of time freedom with that one either, because of all the various problems associated with it. And they're not bad problems, they're good problems. It's what makes the money for you, right? Makes the system work. And that's how a lot of business is done, but it's very difficult and very, very huge upfront investments to get involved with that. So what's the bottom right quadrant? Well, that's called the investment quadrant. And that's where you let your money make the money for you. And that's what we want to talk about today. You've heard me mention it quite a few times probably, and you might have gone, well, how the heck do you do that though? Right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to let the money make the money. And at the same time, what does that have to do with financial leverage? How are you leveraging the man hours of many other people? Because that's what the Lord says is the secret to wealth creation. Well, let's talk about letting the money make the money first. Basically, there are two major ways people think about this. One is called long-term buy and hold investing, And you might call that passive investing. That's where you have a financial advisor and you just give all your money to that person. You let them deal with it because you're busy doing whatever you're doing. And the huge majority of the people, that's what they do. And now you think about that, just if nothing else, the simplicity of this is you take all of the money that you have in the world, your whole life that you've accumulated, you find a little shop downtown that's got a little sign on there that says financial advisor. You walk in, you may not even know the person, and you give them all of your money. Now, who would do that? And yet that's what nearly all people do. Now, what if you say, well, I didn't do that. I've got an uncle that's a financial advisor. Well, from my viewpoint, that's even worse, because if they don't do a great job, you don't have the guts to go tell them and to move your money to someone that does know better how to do it, right? You just won't do it. So that's even more dangerous. And that's passive investing. It's what the whole world knows about. All right. Now, the second kind is called active investing. And sometimes we would call that short-term trading. And by that, at TRADEway, at least, we don't mean day trading. We don't advocate that at all. Many reasons for it. You can even find episodes that talk about that. But we're just talking about shorter term trades. You're not just putting it in there and leaving it forever. You're actually watching the market. You're watching that individual stock or several stocks. You're watching how they cycle and the patterns that they make, and you're watching the news, and you're watching how good the company is, how good their products are. And based on that information, you're determining when to enter that trade or when to exit that trade. And that's more active, obviously, and you have to have some skill sets to do that. And most people don't know much about that. They don't even know that it's a good thing, and they certainly don't think it's a thing they can do. They think you got to be a rocket scientist to do that. And nothing could be further from the truth, because really it's all just skill sets. And one thing we do at TRADEway is we're going to show you the skill sets. Now, I learned these skill sets, or at least the beginning of them, from my grandfather years ago, who was in the oil business, and he had the problem of having cash laying around. He had to figure out what to do with it. So he became a very good stock and bond trader and began to teach those skill sets in the family, to my dad, to me. I teach it to my children and grandchildren and so forth. Many years ago, I got together with my grown children, and we decided, why don't we start sharing these concepts with brothers and sisters around the country. So that's where TRADEway started. We've been doing this for many years now. If you want a great example of what that looks like, you can go out to tradeway.com/memberships and check out Trader Pro. That's really one of the best ways to start at the ground floor and go all the way out to more advanced strategies. So check that out. But the main thing is it talks about active investing, and it's the skill sets. And so think about it this way. It's not like you have to be a brain surgeon to trade stocks. It's just that most people don't have the skill sets. Even if you go to the MBA program at any of the major universities, they're not teaching these skill sets. They're teaching mostly long-term buy and hold passive investing. And basically they're teaching you how to work for a boss. They're not teaching you how to invest in the way that I think gives the most potential for wealth creation. So let's talk about that. Okay, now, like I said, most people know mostly about the long-term investing. Passive investing. And the concept there is you let someone else do it. Secondly, it's long-term, and that's the only right way to do it. There are even statistics professors in the business schools that teach that that's the only way you can do it. And yet, while they were teaching me that, 30 miles away, my grandfather was making money trading. So I knew they weren't right about it, but that's what they were teaching in the business school, that long-term is the only way to do it. And this will somehow create wealth over long periods of time. And that's really what most people think, and they think they can't do it. They're just going to put it in someone else's hands. But the reality is, active investing is what gives the potential for wealth creation. Why? Because it's the only way you create leverage. And remember, the Lord said in the Bible, leverage is the key to wealth creation. Well, how does that work? Well, think about this. At TRADEway, we're going to teach you how to leverage maybe the smartest people in the world at money, and that's the people on Wall Street. We're going to teach you how to use their man hours, their money, and their minds, and the things they've created to create wealth for themselves, and show you how God actually put that on your shelf. That's actually something God put there with you in mind. And it's really exciting when you start to see these things. So the sad thing is, a lot of people, if not most people, just kind of somehow think if they just give their money to someone else and they just leave it in the market for long periods of time, that it's going to create wealth. The truth is, investing does not create wealth. It's for people that are already wealthy. Listen, the world doesn't teach you that. The business schools don't teach you that. This may be one of the few places you'll ever hear this concept, but it's the truth. Investing is for people that already have wealth. And then what do? They invest that because the goal is not high returns. The goal there is safety. It doesn't create wealth. It protects wealth. So if you're at a place where you don't have the wealth yet, that's not going to work for you in your lifetime. But trading does. And this is the message we love so much to take across the country, because when this clicks with people and I see their eyes look at me like I could do that, that's why I teach this stuff. People have asked me a million times, well, why do you teach this? Why don't you just sit in your house and trade if it works so great? Well, number one, God called me to be a pastor and a teacher. So the only thing that makes me happy is teaching. And I could sit in my house or on a beach or in the mountains and trade and be fine, but I wouldn't be happy. So what makes me happy is your eyes when I show you this stuff and you go, I could do this. That's what makes me happy. So that's why I do it. And I know all of our other teachers, it's the same thing. But yes, we are all stock traders. I don't have any teachers who aren't stock traders. Okay. So when you get the grasp of this thing and you see that what actually gives you the potential to create wealth is trading, not investing, it just blows your mind. Because think about this. Let's just get our mind off of stocks for a minute. Let's just talk about trading. What is it? You could trade cars. All right. I had a friend once when he was young. He would go buy a $85 car. It was basically junk, but he knew how to, put some spark plugs in it, fix the carburetor and get it running. And he would sell it for $600. Okay. Now think about that. If you buy a car for $85 and sell it for $600 and you did that 1,000 times in a year, you create wealth, wouldn't you? That's trading. You're trading cars. Or you could, if you want to step it up, how about you build a tennis shoe factory and you trade tennis shoes, right? You buy the materials at wholesale, you put a shoe together, create something that has way more value, and you mark it up at retail and sell it. You're trading, right? Everything in life that's creating wealth for people, it's trading things. You're buying it at wholesale, you're marking it up to retail and making the profit. That's how wealth is created. So we can apply that to stocks, can't we? We can learn to buy a stock that's selling for $50 per share, wait for it to move up to $85 per share and sell it. We make $15 per share times 1,000 shares. We just made $15,000, right? We trade the stocks. And these trades are shorter term. You're not holding them forever. You might buy a stock and you might hold it 2 weeks and it moves up $15, $10, even $5, and you sell it for a profit. But if you had 1,000 shares and it makes $5, that's $5,000 you just made. And the average move on these things is 2 to 3 weeks. So think about just that, and you can get kind of excited about this. So we're going to teach you how to do that. So with stock trading, you not only leverage the brilliant people on Wall Street, their time, their money, their ideas, their systems they've built, but you also can leverage your own money. You might be thinking, well, that is investing. What's the difference? Well, here's the difference. In long-term investing, let's say you take a $50 stock and you buy 1,000 shares. So $50,000 you've invested, right? And let's say you leave it there for a year. What happens during that year? Well, that stock goes up and down and up and down. If you look at a chart, none of them just go straight up. That doesn't happen in the world. They go up and they go down. They go up, and one quarter they have a bad earnings report and it goes back down. So it goes up and down and up and down. So you've left your money in both when it was going down and when it's going up. And then when it goes down, you still left your money in. So what's happening is that is not creating a very high return on investment over that year, because you're also taking the losses. They're paper losses, but every time that stock moves down, you're losing time. And in reality, you're losing money, because time is money in a sense, right? So if you learn to trade, what happens is as that stock moves up, when it reaches your goal, which was maybe a $5 return, you sell it and you put that money in your bank and you let it roll back down. And then you buy it cheap again and it rolls up and you sell it. And you do that maybe 6 times during that year. And what's interesting about it, the total money you might have made in the whole year, you might have made, $500 increase in that stock. But in trading, every time it rolled, you made $500. So if that was 6 times, then you made $3,000 instead of $500. So you see the difference. You've leveraged the money because you're not staying in the market when it's moving down. So that's just one example. I mean, Then you can take it to another level. You can learn how to trade options rather than the stock. And what's interesting is that $50 stock, if you bought the call options, which is a way to make money when the stock goes up, that would only cost you $5 per share to control a $50 stock. So now you can buy 10 times the shares. So instead of 1,000 shares with that $50,000, now you own 10,000 shares. And every time it moves up $5, you make $10,000. And it may do that every couple of 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, so with the long-term buy and hold example, you maybe made $500 in the whole year. But with the trading, with the same investment, basically the same risk, you multiplied that times 6 because you played the roles. So you made $3,000 instead of $500. And, think about this too. What if you don't have $50,000 to buy 1,000 shares of a $50 stock? Well, if you know how to do options, it only costs you $5,000. See, you could control 1,000 shares for $5,000 rather than $50,000. So there's another way to leverage your money. It makes every dollar basically worth $4, $5, $6. So you're leveraging your money too. So there are so many ways to leverage your time and your money when you learn these stock trading concepts. I think one of the very best ways to learn these skill sets is to go out to TRADEway.com/memberships and check out the Trader Pro. Because when you get Trader Pro, it's going to start from the ground floor and move all the way to advanced option strategies. There are live webinars with our teachers on there with you. There are even live webinars with other students and our coaches where you actually choose the best stocks to be trading in. There are live webinars during the market hours where actual trades are made that you can watch. You can even take part in those trades. And then there's coaching. Listen, let me tell you something. It's not rocket science, but it is new skill sets, and you need someone holding your hand when you start out. And if you don't have a coaching program, you're not going to make it. So we have that thrown in with Trader Pro. You have live events. You've got live online events. I think this gives you everything you need to have the potential to create wealth through this concept of leverage. This is one of our most popular memberships because it puts the most tools in your toolbox. All right, guys. Well, next time we're going to get together and talk about specific trading strategies. And I think you'll find that really exciting. So join us again next time. And by the way, if you enjoyed this, please rate and review it, because that way, if there's someone out there that's got the same interest you do, it'll help them find us. All right, have a great day.